Perfect. There we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's session. I see lots of people coming in. Hi, Chris. Hi, Abby. Hi, Melanie. Lots of people joining. I hope everyone's doing well. We're going to give another 15 or so seconds to just have everyone come on in. Okay, super. So I see lots of people coming in. So let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to this AM&P network session. This is an Associations Council Lunch and Learn, Reimagining the magazine. I'm Jen Smith. I'm the director of the Associations Council. Before we dive in, I have a couple of just programming notes for us. First, a reminder of SIA's antitrust statement. It's important that we avoid discussion of sensitive topics, including specifics around pricing and cost information and other topics. Next, we follow a code of conduct in all of our spaces, and we have a strong statement regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion. These short links here I will add into the chat later on so you can read through them all. Also, we are a CAE approved provider, and so this session can be applied for 1 credit toward your CAE earnings. We also have some great things happening at the network. Most notably, we're heading into June. At the beginning of June, we have a Slack chat that is hosted by Diane Resignola. And then, of course, we are so looking forward to Amplify and the Excel Gala, June 22nd and 23rd in DC. I hope I get to see all of your smiling faces in person. And a couple of other notes. So today during the session, the chat is open for all of you to use. Please also use the Q&A module to be able to pose questions to our panelists during the session. And I know that all of our panelists will welcome your questions. And so with that, I'd like to introduce Rachel Barth. Rachel is the Creative and Magazine Director with Military Officers Association of America, and she'll be moderating today's session. Welcome, Rachel.
Hi, Jen. Thank you. So welcome, y'all. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and we're looking forward to having this discussion. So we're going to be talking about reimagining the magazine, and that could mean different things. Our panel is really great, and they come from associations of all sizes and work with associations of all sizes. And they each have a different story to share about what their association or the one they work with is doing with their printed products. And it's not just magazines. There are other printed products, of course, that are also member benefits and important tools for communication. So once again, I'm Rachel Barth with Military Officers Association, and we'll go around. And Tasha, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, I'm Tasha Gordon-Troy. I am the CEO of Ramsey's House Publishing. I work with individuals as well as associations building their publishing programs. I am currently serving as an editorial director for the International Cemetery, Cremation, and Funeral Association in Virginia. And I am a previous head of publishing for the American Immigration Lawyers Association.
Thank you. Tony Lombardo, would you like to go next?
Sure. Yes, I'm one of 2 Tonys on this panel. So I'm Tony Lombardo. I also work for the Military Officers Association with Rachel. I oversee the content editors and staff writer on staff. And I have an emphasis on the digital work that we're doing, but I work in the magazine as well. And I'm also an editor for a PTA newsletter at my kids' school.
Thank you.
Happy
Is
to
that
be here.
is that printed? The PTA
That is
newsletter?
digital only.
Oh, okay. Great. And Tony Lee, would you like to go next?
Sure. Thanks, Rachel. I'm Tony Lee. I'm Vice President of Content at the Society for Human Resource Management, SHRM, in Alexandria. We have 2 print publications, HR Magazine and People in Strategy Magazine. And we've got a pretty robust editorial team, 25 people total, that cover all different aspects. So I'll get into more detail about that later.
Thank you. And Samantha, last but not least, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Samantha Whitehorn. I am editor-in-chief of Associations Now, which is ASA's media brand. So we're a digital first publication as of September 2021. So I manage all the content that's posted on our website and in our newsletter. So excited to talk to you all about that process of moving to that digital first strategy. So.
Thank you, Samantha. I'm looking forward to hearing from all of y'all. So just a couple of notes about today. Please feel free to drop your questions in the chat or in the anything that you have that comes to mind. We'll definitely try to take some questions along the way and at the end. Once again, I'll just tell you a little bit about my experience. I'm the creative and magazine director at MOA, Military Officers Association, and we have a monthly magazine. We also have a newsletter, and Tony can share more details about that and a whole other suite of publications that are considered member benefits. Those are printed, but also available as PDFs on our website to download. Our magazine is definitely a true member benefit. We know that anecdotally, but more valuably from surveys that we've taken of our members. So we do invest a lot in it, but the last year has been challenging. The costs have really risen, and we're talking about costs across the board: freight, paper, ink, manpower, postage, and also the scarcity of paper. That's been a real challenge for our team. We have to plan really far in advance. We have to get used to disappointment sometimes, not just with the costs of things, but also perhaps not being able to get the paper stuff that we're used to getting. We've also had some delays with our magazine. So it's certainly added a level of complexity to what we do with our monthly magazine. And we have also lost some flexibility. We really are locked into page counts pretty far in advance. So I know that those are some of the things that we struggle with, but we like to think and hope that we produce a high quality magazine, and we do know that it's valued by our members. So yeah, I'm really interested to hear about all the different ways this panel can speak to how we're delivering content to our members. And I will hand it over from here. And actually, Samantha, we're going to start with you. If you could share some of your experience about that digital first strategy and how ASA got there.
Yeah, of course. Excited to share. So I'll start with a little bit about ASAE and Associations Now. So ASAE is the American Society of Association Executives. We call ourselves the Association of Associations. So our members are association professionals. So we're then in the unique position that we do a lot of what our members do. And so we have about 30,000 members, and then we have 30,000 non-member readers. So kind of divided our audience there. Associations Now originally started in 2005 when we merged with another association. And at that point, it was really print only. We had 13 issues of the magazine, a really limited digital presence. And by limited, I mean we sent out newsletters to certain sections of our membership. We emailed them, but that was it. But then in 2012, we sort of redesigned everything, just to give you all a background. And we launched associationsnow.com, which was our first foray into sort of a digital publishing strategy, and really setting Associations Now apart from ASAE in the sense that we created a media brand with we wanted to make our advertisers raise revenue, make them excited about this new product. So at that time, we were still producing 12 magazines each year. And then we were, writing 4 to 5 daily pieces of news every day, which was a lot. We had a staff of 7 at that point. We weren't really doing any repurposing of content or anything like that. But then we started to see our advertisers shift and interest from our membership shift to digital. So we started sort of decreasing our amount of issues. So we went from 12 print issues down to 8, eventually down to quarterly as of September 2019. And so then we were really putting more of an effort in digital because that's where we saw that our members wanted. We were seeing great engagement on digital in our newsletter, which is called Associations Now Daily News, which goes out every weekday. So when we made that initial change to quarterly, we also rethought our newsletter format. So we did an AI-driven newsletter. So everyone's newsletter has a different subject line. The orders of the article is different depending on what they've clicked and opened before. And then, of course, we all know the pandemic happened in March 2020. And so we are seeing sort of more of a push for digital, even more so. Our readers were really going all in on our digital content. We're still sending our magazine, but most of the magazines were going to people's offices and people weren't there. And so, the timing kind of worked. We were kind of seeing increased prices, stuff like that. So then in April 2021, we made the announcement that we were going to go digital first as of our September 2021 issue, and we were just going to retire the magazine. And so, like I said, there are several reasons for it: the increased costs, also advertiser interest. We were seeing a lot of advertiser interest in digital. Our digital revenue actually overtook our print revenue in that year. We are also seeing very much increased interest in sponsored content and sort of how we could deliver that from the advertising side of things. And then we just saw from our member satisfaction surveys over the past couple of years and really our web analytics that people were all in on digital. So it just really made sense for us to go all in there. So that's what we decided to do. And we could have just said, we're taking the magazine away and we're going to continue what we're doing because we know it works with digital. But we really wanted to sort of deliver something different. So what we did is we hadn't redesigned our magazine website since 2012. So to say it was old, it felt really old, it felt bulky. So when we, sunset the magazine, we decided to relaunch the website in November 2021 to really give it a new, cleaner look and feel. So it's easier for us to manipulate on our side to present content in different ways. It's also super exciting for advertisers. We greatly increased our advertising space. We changed sizes of ads. We also made sponsored content more prominent. So whereas on our old site, sponsored content sort of lived in a special section of the web page, like a landing page, this time sponsored content, which is clearly labeled as sponsored content, flows into different topic pages. It flows into the home page. So it really gives that visibility. And then from the content side of things, we also wanted to continue to deliver some sort of like magazine feature-y content that we could. So we launched what we call these deep dive packages. And those are bi-monthly digital only packages that really let us dive into a topic that we know is of interest to readers and advertisers because they're sponsored pieces in those products. So since November, we've done 4 of them. We've touched on things that are really important to our readers, like the return to in-person meetings, because we know that's like a huge revenue generator for associations. Also DEI and sort of how associations are going beyond lip service and really putting that into action. And that has had great engagement, and we push those out again through the newsletter. And finally, another thing that we did in terms of content is that we were able to showcase video. So we have a video template on the website now, so we could push out content as the major content feature with just limited text. So we've been really excited about that, which has been great. And of course, I'm sure people are curious what reader reaction was like, what advertiser reaction was like. I know from my side of things, I was sad that the magazine went away because I worked on it for 15 years and all the staff was. And readers, we had readers that were sad, but they also understood because they were in the same position and they knew why we were doing it and they were excited about the new stuff. So it's been overwhelmingly good, the feedback we've gotten, and advertisers are super excited about it and our revenue is taking off, which is great. And we have more flexibility now, so we could change advertising options when it comes to sponsored content when we can, which is really good too. So from my side of things, going all digital has allowed us to be a little more nimble and really pay attention to analytics and work on SEO and smart repurposing and repackaging. So from our side of things, I think it's been really great. So.
Samantha, you talk about something which I don't think we talk about a lot, which is that emotional attachment to print, which I certainly feel. I still get my newspaper and magazine delivered, actually. I'm pretty old school. How do you feel now that it's been about 7 months? Or do you still miss the printed magazine?
Sometimes, but I think with these digital deep dive packages, we get to do that a little bit because they're more featurey. And I know from our writers, they can go more in depth. We tend to write those articles longer and they're multi-sourced, pieces and stuff like that. So, I mean, there's part of me that'll always miss the magazine. And the other thing I should point out is that if there's a revenue opportunity to do some sort of print product, and we don't have any plans to bring back like a magazine on a regular basis, but we're open to thinking about where do we put out print when it makes sense. And we still do, for instance, do a convention daily on site at our annual meeting. So that's like one piece of print that we still do because there's advertiser interest there. There's attendee interest there. And we also do an annual publication that's geared toward board members that, you know, we still do in print just because it tends to be a revenue generating product as well. So
Have you found that by perhaps taking one thing off the list of things you do, has the quality risen in other areas, or do you have more time? You mentioned following analytics.
yeah, I think we have more time to really respond sort of in real time to analytics. If we see something's doing really well or a topic is showing up in search a lot, we can really go back and maybe repackage an article for the next day's newsletter. We see that like the hybrid workplace, this content's doing well. Can we put a new lead on something and put it out tomorrow and react to like what readers are responding to? So yeah, I think it lets us be nimble. I mean, I think we all still feel like it's busy and we're busy just with different things, but I think it's exciting and new things that we didn't really get a chance to focus on previously. So.
And we do have a couple of questions from the panel for you.
Yeah.
One is, did you do a reader survey before you decided to change frequency and go digital?
We did do a reader survey a couple of years ago. So it wasn't right before we decided to go all digital, but we do an annual member survey, a satisfaction survey to sort of see where members were. And just, it was also, a lot of it was just looking at our web analytics and seeing that more people are reading on digital and sort of the engagement going up there. But we do a reader survey every 3 or 4 years. So it's not like an annual thing we do, so.
And in terms of people reading your articles, do you have some sense of a number you could throw out for our panel of what you might consider like a good story that's done well and gotten good readership?
I mean, I think like stories have such a long life, so it's hard to say because, you know, something could come back again and perform really well. I mean, we always say, you know, a couple thousand, you know, 1,000 or more is good in that initial push out, or, you know, but again, with smart repackaging and repurposing, sometimes we put something in a newsletter for a second or third time and it, you know, outperforms what it did the first time around. So it just depends.
And one other question from our group is, did y'all work with a vendor when you transitioned to digital first? I'm assuming this has to do with when you revitalized your website.
Yeah, so we have a content partner. We work with Manifest on our stuff, so they helped us with the redesign. They also, you know, write some content for us stuff too. So we have a sort of like a team internal, and then we have an additional team there. So yeah, they helped with they have a big web team and everything that we don't have the internal capabilities to do. So.
Well, it sounds like that was really smart to sort of time your website redo with giving up the magazine. That sounds kind of exciting, actually.
Yeah, and I think it made us, you know, we talked about the emotional attachment to magazines. I think it made us as editors excited too, that we were able to, we got rid of something that we really liked, but we were able to deliver something new and get to work on building a website, which was just a new thing for us to do too, so.
Okay, just a couple of other questions, Samantha, before we move on from you. What platform do you use for your digital magazine?
For our newsletter, we use Rasa. That's what we use, so.
And a question about sponsored content, and maybe as we go around the horn, y'all can weigh in on this too. We do sponsored content in our magazine and online. Have you seen the interest in sponsored content change over the last few years? There's a question about, has it decreased recently?
No, we've actually seen it increase recently. We're seeing more and more demand for it. So typically right now we do multi-part article series. So we have like, you know, 4 or 8 article series that we do, but starting in in the next coming months, we're going to start rolling out new options that include video options, stuff like that, because we're really seeing that our sponsors want to be sort of, you know, have more of this video strategy, and they're excited about that. So.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Samantha. we're going to switch gears over to Tony Lombardo to talk a little bit more about Military Officers Association. Thank you, Tony.
Thanks, Rachel. Thank you. So I just really want to thank everyone for being here. It's a really good sized crowd. And I think it's really important that we as communications professionals kind of sit down and have some hard thinking about this. But I also think we need to raise it up to our leaders. We need to go back to our associations and talk to CEOs, the board, and help them get familiar that, the status quo, no matter what your situation is, it's not sustainable as part of the job. And so trying to plan forward can be a fun part. It can also be a lot of stress involved with that. But you guys are doing a positive step by being here today. And I think if we just keep the conversations going, it'll be good for our profession. A little more detail about MOA. We're 350,000 members, and our audience skews old, okay? And we're trying to reach younger folks, and when I say younger, I mean 40 and up. But the reality is that we do have an older base of membership. So as you would expect, the magazine is very much loved by our membership. They view that as a member benefit, as Rachel said. And so we maintain a monthly pace, and we really don't have plans to diminish that. Although we talk about it, it comes up as a point of discussion. But based on survey feedback, we know that it is a prime member benefit. And we have paid membership, and we also receive a lot of advertising revenue in print, much more than we get in digital right now. Okay, but as Rachel has said, print and delivery costs are just kind of rising a little out of control. We still have very high quality paper stock. And as I said, it's a primary advertising generator for us. But we are asking ourselves, should we be monthly? And really the number one question, though, that everyone here should be asking is, are we serving the membership how they want to be served? Is this the best method? And so if the answer is a magazine, then definitely continue that. With our audience aging, we know that our younger members are not as interested in the magazine. So what can we do in other ways? And so we have a digital newsletter that comes out weekly, biweekly, and monthly. We're very active on social media, and we have a podcast. So we're definitely exploring other ways to reach that younger base. But then there's another factor that comes in on that, right? Is that, are we overloading ourselves as a comms team, trying to do some of each, right? A little bit of everything to try to reach these folks. And so what the strategy that we're trying to do is focus on what's working and maybe tinker a little bit on certain social channels, explore it, but really lean heavy in on what's working. Okay, so we know the magazine is working. We know the newsletter is working. And I thought I would go in a little more depth with something that wasn't working and that we're working to fix, and we're making some great strides in, and that's the special pubs. So MOA had basically, we serve many audiences. We serve active duty, military retirees, spouses. There's a lot of niche audiences within MOA. And for the longest time, a way to reach the niche audience was to have a special pub just for them. And so we ended up having, umpteen 20 plus special publications that were all designed. They were printed with hard copies. They had to be updated in many cases every single year. And it was creating a backlog of content. And then couple that with the fact that a lot of people, the trend was leaning in that people didn't want to get a pamphlet on this information. They wanted to get it on the website. So what we did was we created a cross association group, kind of a tiger team from communications, marketing, some of our career counselors, even IT folks. And what we did was we were very methodical, and we went through each publication and we identified how much does it cost in money, printing, the cost of print, but also labor costs behind editing it and designing it. We weighed subscriber counts, how many people are buying it, how many people are clicking on the digital PDFs. And we were able to kill some publications. We're going to consolidate some. We're going to have websites for some others. Some will become just a single page on our website with the information. So I would recommend doing this if you guys at your associations, if you have, whether you have 20 publications or just a few, it was really a motivating experience to talk to the other departments. For number one, it was long overdue for us. I think we were focused on day to day, and it was easy for us to look the other way for too long, but we're doing it now. And like I said, it motivated cross department. It's better serving our members, and it's making our lives easier too as communications professionals. So it really was a big win. That's still, we're in the midst of it right now, but I'm very optimistic. So I mentioned at the front end that I'm very focused on digital work for the association. We do have a newsletter that reaches about 320,000 people. And it gets a lot of attention. It's the single biggest driver to our website. So that's an indication that people do want to get our information online as well. We're also working to leverage our magazine content into something special on the website. And also a potential revenue source. So we're working to take our we're taking our retirement guide, which was in print, which is a lot of charts detailing all the places you can live and retire and all the benefits of being a veteran in certain communities, and really a big moneymaker for print. But we're going to have a nice digital display of that next year. We're building it now. We're building it in-house. So we have a developer on our IT team who can build this, which I know not everybody would have. But it's going to be a revenue source. It's going to help retain advertisers. And then not so much a money maker, but just something positive to do is our MOA change makers. And these are outstanding MOA members that we have that we want to highlight and raise up and celebrate. And so now we'd be entering our third year of this program, and it's a really nice feature in the magazine, but we also have a beautiful landing page on the website. And one other last note is that we have a podcast, and that's going in its third season. And so the idea is that if we have a great interview with the podcast, we can use it as a Q&A in the magazine. So it's taking so put it all together, it's really is an overwhelming amount of work. But if you can look at ways where the magazine is feeding these channels or vice versa, it's going to make it easier on the team, and you get the most out of the opportunities you have. And I just want to kind of end my little spiel here with a note of optimism is that the members, if you get a chance to talk to interact with your members, they love the communications work that we're doing. And do not take it for granted what we as communication folks bring to the association, because it is a talent that you do. It's highly important. So just know that you're doing good, whether it's the magazine, print, or our digital work. It's important work that you do.
Thank you, Tony. It's funny you mentioned that digital retirement guide. That was actually a request from our advertisers, something they had asked about, so that when they did that print buy, they wanted to know if there was a digital opportunity as well. And one of the reasons that we thought it was valuable for us to do was to retain those current print advertisers. We had a few questions about revenue in the chat. And Tony, you spoke about the magazine revenue at our association. It is pretty important that we keep that. Unlike ASAE, our digital revenue hasn't yet come close to matching the print revenue.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about sponsored content, and we have seen an increase in sponsored content as well. I think that's partly because we're more open to it than we had been in the past. And I also think that the folks who sell our ads are pushing it harder But yeah, I think that if you're not using sponsored content right now at your association, I definitely consider it. There's ways to do it responsibly and ways to feel comfortable and positive about doing it.
Tony, from a content planning perspective, do you think about those different demographics perhaps that are more likely to be interested in the magazine or the newsletter or the podcast when you plan content?
Yeah, I mean, the number one, we're focused on the best content we can get. You know, if we're the magazine, we just want to fill with quality articles, appealing to our broad demographic, right? But I think it's important to remember the younger folks, and I do think that a podcast is a good way to do that. I think pushing any of your digital products is you're going to reach a younger crowd that way.
And can you share a little bit about how MOA handles video and video production? We had a question about that.
Yeah, so we have a videographer on staff, and we also have a number of staff, including Rachel, who create videos. So I think there's like 5 of us who can create video content, but we do also have a videographer. And I think it's not the sometimes it's thrown around as like the answer to everything. So, you know, I give an example. A board member asked about YouTube and why we're not getting rich on YouTube. And so it's like, well, it's not that easy. It's part of, you know, so it's just one part of the menu. And so I would say try it out and see how it works. But like I said at the very beginning, like you can dabble in certain things, but lean heavy in what works for you. Because if you try to do everything all at once, none of it's going to be good.
Thank you. So we're going to move on to Tony Lee, if you'd like to share a little bit about your experiences at SHRM. And again, thank you again, Tony Lombardo, the other Tony.
Thanks, Tony. Good job. Thanks, Rachel. So quick overview of SHRM. We have about 320,000 members globally. From a content standpoint, the team creates roughly 50 full-length feature articles every week. And so that contributes to both quarterly magazines. I mentioned HR Magazine and People in Strategy. But we also produce 15 online newsletters, roughly 400 webcasts, about 100 podcasts a year. So it's a robust content offering. What's interesting is that while we have all those members, a lot of the content that we create, we offer metered on the website. And so that means, for example, our HR Daily newsletter actually has over 500,000 subscribers, even though we only have 320,000 members, because anyone can subscribe and they can see 3 pieces of content a month for free before they hit the firewall and have to join. In addition to that, we have about 2,000 pieces of member-only content, which tends to be very practical, how to do your job type content, forms and Q&As and that type of thing. And that has an immediate firewall. Number one driver of content to everything we do is Google. Over 70% of our traffic comes from Google. So no matter what we do, no matter what we send out, it's going to be the search engines that make people aware of what we're covering. So let's talk about the magazines. HR Magazine, a little over 3 years ago, we made the decision to go from 10 times a year to quarterly. And the process was an interesting one. I think that, you know, there were a lot of drivers. Probably at the top was the cost of printing and postage, which has only gone up more. In fact, we were on a call of these panelists not too long ago, and I had just gotten the email from Quad saying expect another 8% increase in the next magazine. So it's nonstop increases. But the other thing that was interesting is that we have a robust sales team. We have 4 full-time salespeople and a sales manager and a support person. And they had a quota where they had to sell so much of print, you know, every month, and in addition to their digital sales. And our digital sales are dramatically higher than our print sales, over 20 times more than what we sell in print. But the problem was trying to make their print quota every month kind of held them back. You know, they had to make lots of calls and follow up lots of leads to try and get to their print quota, and it took time away from selling digitally. So one of the reasons of switching quarterly was we dropped the print quota. We just said, look, sell what you can sell, but focus on digital. And the payoff was enormous. The digital revenue just continued to grow exponentially because they've spent even more time on it. What was interesting about the print revenue is that we did not lose any print revenue going from 10 issues to 4. And the primary reason was because there was no one advertising in more than 4 issues a year anyway. So the folks who were in 4 or 3 issues continued to be, and the people who would advertise once or twice a year could continue to do that. So there was no drop in revenue going to quarterly. Now, we did a reader survey asking, members, what do you think about dropping it? And it was kind of a tucked in question on something else. And it basically said it exactly like that. What would you think if we reduced the frequency of the magazine you get from 10 to 4? And it was a negative response. But then we did a reader survey where it was focused just on the magazine. We asked a lot of questions about the magazine, and we positioned it a little differently. And we said, how would you feel if we started giving you more of the magazine features digitally? If we, created opportunities for you to see it, not just when the magazine comes out, but 24/7 anytime with new content being added. And really importantly, we said, and we're thinking of launching a new newsletter that would come out every Saturday morning called All Things Work, in which we would do a magazine style deep dive into a single topic every Saturday. Is that something you would like to see? And it came back overwhelmingly positive. Now, I admit we did throw stuff in there saying, in an effort to be more ecologically friendly and not cut down so many trees, and all that kind of stuff, which certainly helped. But there was very little pushback when we moved from quarter to quarterly from 10 times a year. So members seem to be okay with it. Now, what's interesting is that All Things Work newsletter did extremely well. It's got an open rate now. It's always had an open rate of over 30%. It's approaching 40%, which is a great open rate for something that is delivered on Saturday mornings, which was a big surprise. The other thing is it grabbed a sponsor immediately and has maintained sponsorship throughout its life. And so the advertisers like it as well. Our other publication, print publication, I should say, is called People in Strategy. And we have a sector of our membership that's tied just to the executive audience. So we reach out to people who are vice president of HR or higher, or an equivalent position that's tied to HR, and deliver content specifically to them. We actually have 2 editors dedicated just to that audience, one who focuses online and one who's focusing on the print product. And the magazine has done extremely well. We get very high level folks writing for it. And so it becomes very valued because it's pretty much unlike anything else that's delivered out there. And this is my opportunity to give a shameless plug that we actually have a job opening right now for managing editor of People in Strategy magazine. So if there's anybody out there, shrm.org/jobs, go read about the managing editor role. We're eager to fill it with someone good. It's also a full-time remote position, which I know there are not many of those around. So that's kind of the highlight of what we're doing. And if anyone has any questions, happy to answer them.
Tony, when you reduced the frequency to quarterly, did your page counts go up?
No, actually, it varied. We did have some monthly issues with the smaller page count when we were doing 10. We've pretty much settled at 100 pages and stuck with 100 pages. A good example of that debate was we have our annual conference is coming up in 3 weeks in person. It's not the first time, it's the second time since the pandemic that we've had it in person, but it's the first time we've had it at our usual time of year in June. And attendance is looking phenomenal. We've just crossed the 15,000 level for paid attendance. And we distribute the magazine at that. It's dropped into the bag of every attendee. And so we usually have a very strong advertising interest in it. And frankly, it hadn't been there for last year. It is back. So we have more paid ad pages in this issue that's about to come out than we've had since 2019. And so we thought about increasing the page count. And we ended up not. We ended up sticking to where we are. There's just going to be more paid ads. Pretty hard to get a house ad in there. A lot of people expect house ads in and they're not going to get it. But no, we stuck with the size primarily given quads restrictions that, limited paper quantity. If you need to go beyond, it's going to be even more expensive. So we stuck with where we were.
It's interesting, both you and Samantha mentioned sort of a deep dive digital article, and Tony mentioned this too with some of our association's digital packaging, some of our content. Have you found those to be particularly successful with the audience?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it has to be a combination. It can't really be one exclusively of another. I mean, there are certain readers who like to be able to do a deep dive, and frankly, I love the idea that it comes out on Saturdays, and we get a lot of feedback there. It's you know, not the same type of thing as like a New York Times magazine, but you know, if you get the New York Times and you get the magazine on Saturday, you know that this is something you can take some time over the weekend, settle in with to read a feature that appeals to you. It's the same thing with this newsletter. When we look at the stats, you know, people have it in their inbox when they wake up on Saturday morning. Very few people open it then. The vast majority open it later in the weekend. And frankly, almost half end up opening it in the following week, you know, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So they know it's there. And when they have the time to invest to dive into the content, that's when they do it.
And we did have it's more of a comment, but I'd like to know this too. For both Samantha and Tony, y'all talked about your digital revenue overtaking print. How do the rest of us get to that place? Do you have any insights?
I'm happy to go first. We're very lucky in that we're in a sector where advertising is very robust. I mean, we've got huge companies, given the talent shortages, given what's going on in work in the workplace, companies like UKG, you know, you hear them sponsoring All Things Considered, and you see them sponsoring Sunday afternoon golf. So, I mean, they got real money. So the fact that we're picking up, you know, revenue from folks like them and Workday and ADP and, you know, the folks who have huge budgets, we're just in a very lucky position from that standpoint. But I will say that there is a lot of money flowing into startups, and you're seeing startups with ad budgets that you didn't see before. And they're only interested in digital. They have no interest in print. So if you make yourself available to those type folks, you know, you may pick up some revenue. I don't know, Samantha, what do you think?
You know, I agree. I think we were in a lucky place too that, you know, a lot of our typical print advertisers were hospitalities and hotels. A lot of our readers plan meetings. So of course, you know, that took a hit when the pandemic happened and people weren't traveling, people weren't going to meetings. But what we really saw was an uptick in virtual meeting offerings and sort of advertisers in that space and the tech space pick up, and they wanted the digital advertising. So I think we just sort of lucked out in that case too, that sort of that's where the market was moving and where it's kind of stayed. So.
Yeah, you're reminding me, as Tony said, there's not a one size fits all approach, right? It's about your membership and the demographics. And on the revenue side, it's about what kind of advertisers you have. And we have one more question for you, Tony, if you don't mind. That the current issue you were talking about before your meeting, do you happen to know the ad edit ratio offhand?
I do. It's about 78% edit, 22% ad, which is about the maximum we can do without having to pull a feature, which we don't want to do.
Thank you so much. We're going to move on to Tasha, and I do hope that we'll have some time for a little bit of follow-up and some last questions at the end. But Tasha, would you like to share a little bit about your story?
Hi, yes. I guess I'm sort of on the panel to sort of bring the smaller association angle to everything, because you may have heard from everyone else, we're talking hundreds of thousands of members, whereas there are a lot of associations out here that focus so specifically on a niche where they're very small and they're very community oriented. And so the two associations that I've had experience with mainly are small associations, niche associations. And so it's a different perspective, even though we all probably have similar problems and similar situations that we have to deal with. A small association has a very small budget and tends to also have a small department or a small employment base for the most part too. So when you're talking about smaller associations trying to make change, it's a matter of knowing, like, how do you go about doing that when you only have a certain number of people on staff, you only have a certain amount of money in the budget, that sort of thing. So just in terms of my experience specifically, the association that I serve as the editorial director for is an association of 10,000 members. The members are entities as opposed to individuals. They are very, very niche. And if anyone is any bit familiar with the funeral, cremation, and cemeterian industry, you know it's very niche, it's very slow to change. And that's another issue when it comes to a lot of associations, is depending on the size of the association, they can be very slow to change. But you also have to maintain your change based on what your members will allow you to change for the most part. So you can't necessarily just jump right into something and expect your members to follow through. So that's always an issue too. So when it comes to this particular association, which I joined them in 2019 before the pandemic, their issue at the time was that they needed someone to come in and breathe new life into their member magazine. At the time, my predecessor had been working on that magazine and working for the association for about 20 years. She was retiring. And prior to that, the executive director and the operations director basically gave her carte blanche and allowed her to just deal with it. And even if they didn't necessarily like what she was doing, they just let it go and were fine. You know, it's like, let's just keep that ball rolling. So when it came time for her to retire, they actually were interested and said, you know, let's see what else we can do out here, because they had seen what other associations were doing. They knew they could do more with their magazine. And so they wanted to figure out how to go about doing that. So we kind of went, we had a little clandestine meeting away from the office so that we could actually have a conversation where she was not involved. And I really laid it out to them and explained to them what my opinion and what I thought I could do with their magazine. At the time, the magazine was just, the whole layout was stale. It was poorly written. It was poorly laid out. It was really at the time being very ignored by the members, which is something that you don't want. If you're getting the magazine and you're putting that kind of money out every month to put the magazine out, and you know that this is the staple of your association, you don't want to hear that members have no idea when they're getting it. They have no idea where it is. They're not reading it. It's just something that they get in the mail and they throw it on a table or somewhere and they forget all about it. That's what they had been hearing about it, but they just weren't sure how to go about changing that. Because you can't necessarily change the person who was responsible for it. So they sort of bit the bullet for the most part and just kept going. And so we had a really good conversation about what could be done with it. And when they decided to sign with me, they knew that they were going to get a totally fresh perspective on this magazine. And as of, I want to say, May of 2020, we were already in the process of revamping the whole magazine, a new title for it and everything. And our plan was to go live with the new issue at their annual convention, which was scheduled for May 2020 at the time. And as we were getting closer and closer to this date, we realized everything that was going on around us, that wasn't going to happen. So they ended up canceling their convention. And because of this particular association being very small and very accustomed to doing the same things over and over every year, it's like this convention, this particular program, same things, whatever. They were pretty much really caught off guard by this. And by losing their convention, that meant they were losing a heck of a lot of money. However, one thing that they were certain of was that they did not want to lose their magazine. And so we kept that going. Everybody else, I mean, they were cutting staff, they were cutting staff salaries, they were doing all they could to get through that. And the one thing that they were very certain about was that we cannot lose the magazine, because advertising is what drives their magazine. And if you can at least give the advertisers and the members a way to continue to connect with other members, then that was very important for them. So in doing all of that, we had to sort of get the members back involved in the magazine too, because they hadn't been. The whole time that this other person was working on this, she was pretty much doing most of the writing and sort of just picking and choosing who she wanted to have involved. And I didn't feel like that was the best way to go about it, because a member magazine really should be owned by the members. They need to have a role in it. They need to be very involved in it. So we really had to do a lot of pushing to get that word out, to say that this is going to be it's a new situation, it's a new day, we want you involved. As of now, I have people constantly coming to me offering content, which is exactly what we wanted. So it's taken roughly 3 years to get to that point, but we knew we could do it. And once they saw that it had changed and that it was going in that right direction, that they really saw that it was going where they wanted it to go. Because like with every demographic, our demographic is changing as well. So for the most part, we have the old guard, and those are the people who pretty much are still on the boards and on the executive committee and so forth. But then we have these younger people coming in, and they're looking for new content and new ways of really getting involved with their members and with their industry as a whole. So a lot of them are offering content as well and getting involved. And that's something that we really wanted to see as we were moving forward. Other things that they have actually done, and I've been pretty pleased to see, because even though it's taken 3 years, we're now moving in the direction of doing a website for the magazine, so that we have an actual digital version of our website. And then that's another way for us to get involved with our advertisers and really pull them into that as well. One thing that we know for certain, though, is that the magazine in print will not go away. We are that type of industry where our advertisers and our vendors want to be involved in a print magazine. The majority of our members still want to get a print magazine. So the website is sort of going to be a supplement. And as we build up, and hopefully over time, we'll see more and more connections going to that website. But it's an easier way for people to now share what they're offering in our magazine. That's been an issue too, is that a lot of people have come to me and said, well, how can I go about sharing this on social media and so forth? And we're not in a position to do so. And I've had to tell people that. And I've talked to the executive director and others and saying that from the very beginning, we have to move in this direction. Small associations can be slow in doing that. But now that we're getting to this point where we're getting beyond the pandemic, we're getting back into in-person meetings, their revenue is starting to build back up. They're now interested in taking that next step. So this fall, we're going to launch a website, and we're going to really focus on building the advertising for that website. A lot of our advertisers are interested in doing video. So we now have that opportunity where we can actually offer them a place to do video ads and so forth. We're also going to be doing other things. I think, Tony, you had mentioned something about you called it change makers. We're actually doing something similar to that as well, where we're going to be focusing on members within the association. And this gives us an opportunity to put out content, not just in the magazine, but in other places where we can push people and get those numbers up. So we're also planning. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to add, with Changemakers, the benefit of turning that from primarily a first print-driven project into digital is the thought was that's something people could share with their networks, and knowing their more members, their networks would have more potential members. So that led the decision to turn that into a digital project as well.
And that makes sense. And like I said, a lot of people have been coming to me on a regular basis asking, how to go about sharing, because we have more people who are willing to write for the magazine. And so that means they want to share that. They want to build their own brand in terms of putting their content out there as well. So we're now getting to the point where we can give them that opportunity. So I was very pleased about that. But it's interesting to note the differences between small associations and larger associations. Small associations do have a tendency to move slower. They do have a tendency to have lower budgets. They have a tendency to have less, skill sets on staff because they have a smaller staff. So there are different ways that they can approach things, but it's always a different way of doing it than what a larger association might go about doing things.
Thank you so much, Tasha. You're reminding me as well that for our association, as Tony Lombardo had said, we have an older membership. We actually only have emails for, I think it's about 60% of our membership. So that magazine, the print magazine, it's a really vital communication tool for us. And I mentioned the age because we have some members a little wary of giving out their emails. Anyway, we're actually closing in on time. I was hoping we'd have a little bit more time for some last questions. I did want to mention, though, you talked about the changing audience, Tasha. I think that's one way that Reimagining the magazine has happened. Certainly at our association, we're trying to be more inclusive, both with our print and digital content of the stories we tell and who we write about, and even broadening our writer base. So that's another way that magazines and content can move into the future, right? I think it's important. Is there anything else that y'all would like to share on that, or any other topic that came up here? We did have one question that I think I'll throw out as we close out. A lot of questions actually about measuring engagement and tracking those numbers. How much of a time commitment is that for those of you doing a lot of digital content?
I mean, I would say that we have a dashboard that we can go in and look at in real time. We're not in there hours a day. I might, I'll go in there if I'm curious. I think we look at top level things. Like if we're deciding, should we repurpose an article, I might go in and see like what topics are doing well. Or even sometimes it's the lower performers on topics that we know traditionally do well. So should we push that out again and see if it does better the second time around? So yeah, we're not, luckily the dashboard's easy to use. We can kind of just look at a glance. We do have like a quarterly metrics report that gives us like a bigger picture. So we sort of push that in addition to the real-time stuff. So
I'll throw out some tools real quick. So we use Google Analytics for the basic traffic stuff. All our emails on Marketo, so we get great reports from Marketo. We use Tableau for website statistics, a lot of interesting stuff there. And then a number of different tools for our blogs and our webcasts and our podcasts to measure them.
Tony, how big is your communication staff?
Editorial team's 25.
We're about 15, and it does take a lot of work, even with all those tools, that it helps when you have a big staff.
We have a web content manager, and so he's responsible for wrangling all that stuff and then sharing the data. So it's somebody's job.
Well, thank you all so much. Thank you to our panelists for sharing your time and insights. And thank you to everyone who attended today. This will be available later if you'd like to watch it, or if you missed it, came in late. And we just really appreciate everyone's time. I learned a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks, everybody.
thank you.
Thanks, Rachel.